this is the video that you need to really ace your AR section in the UCAT. I'm going to give you very applicable tips where you can really apply them and will really boost your marks in the AR very quickly. So I only have 3 things that I want to mention. I'm going to make this video very quick and really kind of get you the most amount of content and kind of get you the most valuable tips that I can provide in order to really ace the the AR section in the UCAT. So let's get right into it. Number one of the 3 things is really the repetition. I think it's very important, especially in a section like AR. You have to really repeat the questions and kind of, make it a daily routine where you're kind of maybe, doing 50 questions a day or maybe 30, 20 questions a day, but kind of make it a habit where you're doing this consistently over days. And what that really does, it kind of gets you into that rhythm of pattern recognition, and it will really help when you're trying to do well in the AI section. If you kind of skip, let's say you don't do it for a month or you don't prepare for it for, let's say a couple of weeks, you kind of realize that you kind of lose that rhythm of, recognizing your patterns very quickly. And quickly recognizing patterns is pretty much the whole game of acing the AI section in the UCAT. So it's very important that you're able to, kind of make it a routine. It's just, what I used to do was just like set a routine where I would do 50 questions a day that are AR. And I think unlike other sections, especially the VR or the DM, I think repetition really gets you those results because it kind of trains your brain into really kind of trains your brain to always thinking patterns and kind of gives you an idea of what you will see. So I think the number one step or really ace it is just practice a lot and make it a kind of a daily thing. So you kind of build that rhythm. Very simple stuff. The second thing is, I think the best thing they can really do to quickly ace and quickly improve on your UCAT score in the AR section, and that is making a pattern list. Now, there's kind of 3 types of pattern lists that you can make. One is all pattern lists. So, every single question that you see, you're going to write it down. So, for example, let's say, I see a question where it's like odd and even out of triangles. I will write that down, and I'll write every single pattern that I see, and that really helps. And what that really does is allows you to know every single possible pattern that you can ever see, and there's a limited amount of patterns that they can throw at you. So it's very important that you kind of make it all pattern lists. Another thing that I really find really helpful is making a wrong question list. So for example, patterns that you kind of get wrong, make a separate list for that. What I found was that some patterns were just naturally harder for me to kind of recognize. And if I'd written them down, if I'd written that down multiple times of exactly what pattern it is, I can kind of consciously think about those patterns if I'm stuck in a particular question. So I think what's really important is kind of having that wrong question list. And the third one really is different types of patterns. So I'll kind of get into that more in detail and kind of tell you what that's all about. So this is it's my personal thing that I really used, and this is my all pattern list that I had. So for example, you can see, number 1, shape has 1 internal angle, other has 2. Number 2, white shape at the bottom of the box, ignore everything else. So it can be very simple like that, it doesn't have to be very extensive, as long as you understand what's going on. And I'll kind of refer back into this list if I can, kind of revise it a little bit here and there. But ultimately what it really does, it really helps you to have a list of possible patterns that you can ever see. If you do enough practice questions, linking it back to part 1, if you do enough practice questions, I guarantee by the time you get into the UCAT, you would have seen 99% of all patterns they can throw at you. And usually it's quite easy. The AR section does kind of get eaten in the practice questions you'll see online. So that's one thing. And this is an example of like the types of pattern kind of list. So you can break it down to number, shape and size, position, color, angles, and symmetry. And what this really kind of helps you, it's like a checklist you can do. So each pattern could be either or one of this, or it could be multiple of this. So it could be a number pattern, also shape and size pattern as well. But ultimately, a lot of those patterns will kind of fit into this. So for example, number of sides, number of sum of all angles, kind of count that. Number of enclosed areas, it's prime numbers or square numbers. And it could be a mixture of doesn't have to be one, it could be a mixture of them as well. But I think this is a very good way to kind of narrow that all pattern list down into kind of things you can look at. So, for example, when I was in the test, if I get stuck, I'll just kind of go back into this. Okay, have I looked at all the numbers? Have I looked at the shape and size? Have I looked at the position? Have I looked at the color, angle, symmetry, etc.? And it's kind of a checklist in your head if you forget during the test. Right, so now other tips that are really important, in in the UCAT, in the AI section. First is time management in the test. Now, it's a very, very time challenging kind of test. You have very limited time, and I think it's very crucial that you are able to really allocate the time perfectly. And that will save you a lot of marks, and that will save you really kind of panicking at the end where you have like 20 questions left and then a minute that you have to do. So what I like to really do is kind of have a rule where if I don't see the pattern within 35 seconds or 30 seconds, I skip. And there is an advantage. Just usually, if you can't see it in 30 seconds, it's a very rare chance you'll see it later on. But also, if you do decide to skip it, you come back to it with fresher eyes, and that really helps you to, I guess, look at it with fresh new eyes and a fresh new perspective. And I find it personally that, it makes it much more easier for me when I'm doing it. When I look at it again, I kind of tend to get it when I've skipped it before. So I think time management is very, 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 very helpful. And you want to make sure that you're not leaving questions till the end where you have to rush it. So really make sure you know when to skip and know when not to skip. So sometimes it's not a good idea to skip all the time because it kind of destroys your confidence. And with AI, a lot of it is confidence. If you're, for example, skipping 2-3 patterns in a row, that's going to do really, really bad for you in terms of your confidence, and it's going to kind of affect your confidence when you go into the next pattern. So there is a kind of fine-tuned balance I need to maintain in terms of when to skip, when not to skip. But it's very important that you kind of figure out your own strategy into what works and what doesn't work. And the last one is viewing a pattern, and I'll explain that with a practice question. Okay, so now in terms of viewing a pattern, this is a very useful skill to have. It kind of looks at the way in which you kind of first try to solve a pattern. And for me, what I like to do is simply go in set A or set B, doesn't really matter. Pick out the most basic square I can find. So for example, for me, the basic square I can probably find is this one. So I'll just focus on that. And then find the other two basic ones. So maybe let's say this is a basic one, also this one's a basic one. Now don't spend ample of time, a second or two. Just figure out what the simple pattern is, what the simple square is, and using that as your reference guide. So let's say I found that this is a simple pattern, and these are two squares surrounding it. Now I'm going to just use those three to look for the pattern in set A. I'm not going to bother with the other ones because one, they're much more difficult. There's a lot of moving parts to that one. Secondly, what the UCAT people that make the test, what they like to do is kind of add in those distractors where it's just a distractor that's not really related to the pattern. It's just there to kind of throw you off. So let's say I look at this. So okay, already I can see every pattern in those three start with a black square. So a black square is the starter. I see gray circle comes in, and then after a gray circle is followed by another circle, and then followed by a black square. If I go here, I see a white one kind of splits into two. And then this one, gray splits into one, but then white splits into two. So already the pattern that I'm kind of seeing is white will split it into two, gray will split it into one. And that's pretty much a pattern, and I'll just go with that. And I'll obviously check with set B. Set B usually is going to be the opposite some sort. So example, white does one, gray does two. It kind of bifurcates into two. So that's pretty much it. I also have an extensive list of all the patterns kind of that I've written down, including some other tips and other AI tips. So if you'd like to check them out, they're in the link below. It's extremely affordable, but it really, really does help, and it's something that I personally used in my UCAT prep. So do check it out. And if you like the video, please do like and subscribe. If you have any questions, please write them in the comments down below. I'll make sure I answer them as well. But other than that, have a great day.